Thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you, Harold, for your kind introduction. I want to thank Kevin O'Connor and Pete Gorman for their friendship throughout the years, and David Billy. David probably gets more calls from members of Congress than anyone in this room, quite frankly. So thank you, David, for your patience. I'm always glad to be speaking to a group like this and to have the opportunity to share with you my insights as a member of Congress from New York and now as a member of the House Democratic leadership. As Harold just mentioned, I was recently elected by my colleagues vice chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. It's the 5th highest ranking position in House Democratic leadership. So I want to thank many of you for your support, and I'm pleased to be in a position to further fight for our shared values and our priorities. And we do have a lot of fight ahead of us. Unfortunately, we seem to have fallen into a system of governing that leads us from one crisis to another. And the American people don't want governing at the edge of the cliff. What they want is fewer cliffs and more responsible governing. They want us to work in a productive, collaborative way on the issues that face our nation. And you know, we used to be able to work in a bipartisan way, particularly on issues facing our firefighters and our public employees. I've been disappointed in recent years to see that fall by the wayside more and more each year. For example, after Superstorm Sandy hit New York and the tri-state region, it was very discouraging that it took Congress 3 months to get anything done to help the area recover. Never should so much time pass before Congress helps citizens in need. We never did it before until this particular superstorm. But I think this just shows how polarized the environment in Congress has become, where even something like helping people and businesses put their lives back together after a devastating storm becomes subject to political controversy. You know, the President came to Capitol Hill just last week, and he met with Democrats and Republicans in both the House and the Senate. I would have hoped my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would recognize that the President wants to be successful at his attempts at compromise. I was disappointed to see some members criticize the President's outreach efforts, but I think the fact is the President was caught in a situation of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I hope there are some members who will take the President's outreach effort in the spirit in which they were intended. To be clear, I don't think everyone on the other side of the aisle is a bad person or has bad intentions. The truth is I have some very good relationships with many of my Republican colleagues and would in fact call some friends. So I hope we will start to turn things around. The presidential elections are behind us, and we have issues ahead of us, like reversing the damaging cuts from sequestration, raising the debt ceiling, and most importantly, keeping our economy growing. That will demand cooperation from all sides. That's what will enable us to do big things, like a comprehensive overhaul of our tax system. As you may know, and as was mentioned by Harold, I am a member of the House Committee on Ways and Means, which has jurisdiction over all tax and revenues measures. In an effort to compile facts and build a bipartisan spirit, Committee Chairman Dave Camp and Ranking Democrat Sandy Levin created 11 different small working groups to drill down on the big issues we face in tax reform. I support this effort, as these tax working groups are a good way for members to have a more personal, but I think also very factual discussion on tax policy without cameras or theatrics that we're used to. These are also a good way for us to build a personal relationship between members who may not know each other. I am the co-chair of the Tax and Income Distribution Working Group. Our working group is empowered to look at every aspect of the tax code and how it affects Americans. That includes tax rates, credits, deductions, and spending in the code. Yes, there is spending in our tax code. Much of it is important, but some of it is wasteful and duplicative. I'm happy to take a look at how to eliminate or consolidate unnecessary spending. There is also egregious spending in the tax code where your tax dollars are spent on tax breaks that do not empower the middle class, do not lift the working poor, and do not create jobs. All they do is line the pockets of some at the expense of everyone else. We need to end that type of tax spending. But right now, we are entering the meat grinder of the mandated across-the-board cuts known as sequestration. A colleague of mine from Wisconsin had a constituent who was on television, and the reporter asked him, "What do you think of sequestration?" And he responded, "I think it's great." The reporter said, "Well, you know, it means automatic across-the-board cuts in both domestic and defense spending." And the constituent said, "Oh, I thought they all had to go into one room and they couldn't come out until they made a decision," which is what Congress should be doing. But these are cuts that will reduce aids to cities and towns and strain local budgets even further than they've been strained. Cuts that will slash the fire grant program for local fire departments, for instance, and cuts that will rob some of the promised health benefits for the firefighters and other first responders who ran into the Twin Towers when others were running out. The truth is, Paul Ryan, John Boehner, and many Republicans in Congress refuse to even look at or eliminate $1 of tax spending. They argue that it is raising taxes. Exhibit A, the Republican budget that will be debated on the House floor this week. That budget doesn't stop $1 of tax spending. It doesn't get rid of the tax break for owning a corporate jet. I don't know how many of you have one of those, but you should be careful. You're under attack. The tax break for companies to deduct the cost of moving U.S. jobs to China and elsewhere overseas, or the loophole that allows 3,000 Americans earning over $500,000 a year to avoid paying any federal income taxes. Zero, nada, zip. But when looking at tax spending and all tax expenditures, we need to separate out the bad tax spending from the positive tax spending. And I'm working with my colleagues to support the mortgage interest deduction as it helps working people afford a home. We need tax credits like the American Opportunity Tax Credit to make college more affordable for people who can't write a $50,000 check to a university each and every year. I support allowing workers to invest their own money into retirement accounts tax-free, as that builds savings for retirement. And we need to protect tax-free, employer-sponsored health care so employers will continue to provide high-quality health insurance to their employees. This is not only a bedrock principle of U.S. tax law, but it really is a principle of U.S. values. And that's why I oppose proposals in various deficit reduction plans to eliminate these tax preferences. I joined an effort led by my colleagues, Representative Joe Courtney of Connecticut and Tom Cole of Oklahoma, to speak out against these proposals. We signed a letter that asked members of the supercommittee charged with considering deficit reduction proposals to reject any suggestions to scale back or eliminate tax exclusions for employer-sponsored health coverage. And whenever this issue comes up again, we will fight against it again and again. Employer-sponsored health insurance coverage is the hallmark of the American system of health care coverage for American families, and it must continue to remain so. When Congress drafted the health care law, we looked at various ways to finance the law so it would not add a cent to the deficit. And for the record, that law is fully paid for and does not add a single penny to our nation's deficit. In fact, the House Republican budget keeps every dollar of revenue raised in Obamacare and every dollar of Medicare savings found, all $715 billion worth, but eliminates all of the positive aspects of the law. It eliminates the provision protecting people with pre-existing conditions, the language expanding the prescription drug benefits for our seniors. It's ironic that the party that hates the health care law will actually vote to support it this week in Congress, but of course, just the spending cuts and revenue sections and not any of the benefits for the American people. In fact, Obamacare, as passed into law, cuts the deficit by over $100 billion while expanding coverage, improving care, and keeping health care for municipal workers like firefighters, police officers, and EMS responders. If you like your health care, you get to keep it. When this law was being written, Congress looked at every approach to pay for the bill, including eliminating the tax benefit for employers to provide health insurance coverage to their employees. And Democrats soundly rejected removing this tax benefit for middle-class families like yours. It's clear this benefit is important to the basic concept of the U.S. health care system. These are not the notorious tax spending examples. These are investments in the tax code that benefit tens of millions of Americans, including many of the people in this room. My concern is that the governing principle on tax reform being proposed by the House majority is not realistic, and it will do harm to the middle class. Their basic premise is reducing the top corporate and individual rate to 25% in a revenue-neutral way, which can only be done by eliminating most, if not all, tax deductions, credits, and benefits across the board. That includes not only the wasteful tax spending, but also all of the positive investments for savings and health care in the law. To make these low tax rates actually come to life, it will mean the end to tax benefits for employer-provided health care and retirement security, along with the end of the mortgage interest deduction, tax breaks for higher education, and the charitable giving deduction. So while I'm still listening to all parties and I'm open to tax reform, I will not support any tax reform that sacrifices the hard-won tax benefits that keep middle-class families safe, that invests in our futures, and maintains the health care that our families deserve. Any plan that takes these away will get a strong no vote from this member of Congress. There's a big difference between wasteful spending, and we need to end that, and the important investments that we've made in middle-class families. I know the difference, and I will vote that way for you and for hardworking American families across this country. Thank you again for having me here today and for doing what you do and for being who you are, the heart of America. God bless you all.
Terrific.